the time and space to give yourself a break. Here you'll find some love, music, laughter, and above all, she'll dare to tell the truth. And so come to Granny's place and give your spirit a big boost.
Welcome to Granny's Place, a haven for love, entertainment, and uncommon sense. I'm Sweet Baby James, here to introduce you to Granny Rocks and to today's theme, which is our ongoing theme, which is you ask the questions, Granny provides the answers. And so now, without further ado, here's Granny.
Welcome to Granny's Place. So happy to see you today. So first, the two most important pieces of business. Did you notice I got a haircut?
Yeah, that's important.
Did you notice the mop is gone? So, Sweet Baby James got a haircut
as well.
That's right. So we both have haircuts, and that's very exciting. To us, because normally
we were way overdue.
Months and months. So anyway, but the other thing that I want to talk about is maybe not quite as trivial and ridiculous. Is my heart goes out to all the people who are suffering now from the fires all over. I know about the fires on the West Coast because that's where we are, and it's really bad. So our prayers are out for the firefighters and for some sanity about climate change, facing the realities of global warming, and how about let's do something about it instead of turning back the emission standards for cars so that we can all have more cancer, more pollution, and more global warming. I mean, do you really think that's such a good idea?
What's not to like?
What's not to like? Okay, anyway, the devil made me do it. I couldn't help myself.
I agree with you.
That was not a question. Nobody asked me about my hair or about climate change. Someday someone will.
There you go.
Okay.
So, the first question is from Anonymous, and the statement here is, when around other people, I feel judged. When I'm around other people, I judge. So one of the threshold questions then would be, what is judgment and how does that differ from discernment?
Well, let me just say something first.
Okay.
Before you get into your question, that's a good question. But I just want to say that we all have this problem. I think every one of us somehow, some way has a fear of being judged. And unless you're some kind of an I don't know who, we're all pretty judgmental. So I just wanted to say that before we got into the topic. Okay, so now, what was your question?
So how is that different from discernment?
How is judgment different from discernment? Well, that's a good question. So let's start there. It's like, what do we mean by judgment? All right, so you have to judge things. It's like, okay, I'm driving into my parking spot, right? And the question is, do I have an inch to spare, or do I have a foot, or do I have a yard, or what do I have? Or do I have less than an inch? It's like, crash! So, you have to use your judgment sometimes, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because what our judgment should be about is like evaluation of things. In my judgment, it's not a good idea to put arsenic in my tea.
Right.
So that's a judgment call, right?
Yes.
And probably not a good idea to put arsenic into anybody's tea. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
First of all, who wants to kill people? And the second thing, who wants to get arrested and, maybe die for some momentary freak out? So, the question is, then why are we so upset about judgment, right? Well, it's because the intention of using our judgment is to help, is to do the right thing, is to do something that works better than something else, right? Okay, for example, I think it's better to try to measure distance with a ruler than with a thermometer. You see what I'm saying? That's a judgment call. Right? So the purpose is to make things work better. But being judgmental is not really the purpose. Like, oh, her hair. I didn't even want to talk about hair, but I just started talking about hair. So I will talk a little further about hair. When I was born, over 73 years ago, people thought hair like mine was just weird. First of all, there was so much racism against black people that anything that looked like, frizzy was bad, right? But in addition to that, everybody was supposed to look like Doris Day. So that was hurtful judgment, not helpful judgment, right? That's the difference. It was meant to put some people down and raise some people up. So I'm sitting there judging you like, oh, you are so whatever, slow. You are so stupid. You are so untalented. You are so coarse. You are so awkward. You are so whatever. Mean. And the purpose of judgment is to make some people look better than others. Hopefully make me look better. And you look worser. So that's the difference between judgment as we understand judgment, right? And discernment, which is really discerning the kind of judgment I was talking about first.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Okay. Now, do you think being judgmental or feeling judged starts in childhood?
Oh, definitely. That feeling of being judged. So what I wanted to say to Anonymous first is that I think we all have that experience, is that we feel judged and we are judgmental. And where does that start? Of course it starts in childhood. Everything seems to start in childhood. It's like, even if it doesn't, we get to blame something, right? So we have to blame childhood, but that's usually the way it is. It's like, okay, so let's say you're the first child and your nose goes like this. Well, mine did. Well, it wasn't when I was really, you see that? When I was really young, my nose didn't do this. My nose was like cute and perky, like it's supposed to be. So, right? So let's say you're born with a nose that develops as you get a little older. It starts to go like that. So the mother is looking at you and saying, oh no, I've given birth to a freak. Oh no. Now, I don't want my child to feel like a freak, but I'll just keep going like this. I'm not kidding. When I was growing up, my brother used to go like this to me all the time because his nose went up. He also didn't have kinky, frizzy hair, I want to tell you. So the judgment was that he was better looking, right? His nose did the right thing. His hair did the right thing. So there was a comparison there. Now, it just so happens that he was the firstborn. I was the secondborn. I was talking about it the other way around. But still, it doesn't matter because whichever way, there is comparison going on, right? You're being compared to someone else, and that's where judgment, it's like, oh, I don't want to admit that I think my first child is homely and my second child is so adorable. Oh, she's so cute. Everybody stops me on the street, and it makes me feel so good because people say, oh, that child of yours is just so adorable, right? And I go, oh yes, thank you, like it means anything about, like I'm saying thank you when they're, like have you ever noticed that, you're walking along and your dog is, someone says, oh, your dog is so cute, and you say thank you, like you had anything to do with how cute that dog is, unless maybe you did take it to the groomer, or fed it or something, but you understand what I'm saying? So it's like a reflected thing, so parents feel better about their brilliant children or their athletic children or their incredibly handsome children or their helpful children or whatever it is that they judge as being significant. And so you are going to be compared to someone else. So here I hear in your question, Anonymous, who is our favorite, by the way. Anonymous writes to us all the time. And we love it. Keep those cards and letters running. So anyway, not running. So Anonymous, you probably had an experience in your childhood where you felt judged by someone. Maybe you were being compared to another child. Maybe you were being compared to someone out there in the world, Johnny next door. Maybe you were being compared even to your parent. I mean, somebody could say, oh, my wife is such a doll, but my daughter is such a brat, or something like that. So it starts with comparison, really. As I was saying before, but judgment, it's not being helpful. It's not looking for, this is, what is the best thing to do here? I use my judgment. Or, oh my God, I see that this person is suffering. What can I do to help them? No, it's because we're using it for competitive reasons. So you may have had some painful experiences when you were a child where you felt judged, and maybe you were being judged, right? And then in self-defense alone, we have to be judgmental back. It's like, well, my nose may go the wrong way, but I'm smarter than he is, or I'm something. I have to defend myself, right? And I have to defend myself by putting someone else down. So that means being judged and being judgmental usually do go hand in hand. I mean, it's not just like you learn to be judgmental by watching other people, which you do. My mother was always in judgment of everything. Frank, she would tell my father his outfits were they never matched. Well, they didn't, but that was her judgment that was a terrible thing. So I watched judgment, and I didn't want to be judged, right? And so I also wanted to prove all the time that I was better than the other person, so that I would be in favor of my mother. You see what I'm saying? So judgment and being judgmental, they go together. Just we see it happening, and it's our self-defense against being judged. So, sweetie, it sounds like you've had your fill of that.
Now, what can she do if the judgments are accurate?
Well, that's a very good question.
Like, what if she's a D student and she's said to be a below average student?
Right. Well, it would be really great if we could say, oh my goodness, that is so true. Just like with no charge on it. Okay. My nose is pointy. It is pointy. And isn't that lovely? What's wrong with that? Or my hip. They used to call me Brillo when I was growing up. I don't know if people know what Brillo is, if they still have it.
Oh, it's still around. We have some.
Okay. So, broccoli head, stuff like that, So
that's cruel. It
was mean. Cruel. It was being mean. That was the intention, was to make themselves feel better by making me look worse. Okay. But if I could just say, you're right, I have very curly hair. Isn't this cool? Or if you are a D student, and say, well, is that important to you? Is that a value of yours to do well in school? Is that really an important thing in your life? And if so, how can I help you? See, it takes a village to change a person, because if the way we first learn about these things didn't feel negative to start with, right? Then we wouldn't feel negative when people point it out. So if someone says, oh, look at those glorious curls you have. Lovely, Or, gee, I noticed that you're not doing that well in school. Is that a problem for you? And what can we do to help you? You don't feel bad anymore. So the thing is, if our whole society started thinking that way, right, we would have an amazingly different experience ourselves. But as an individual person, isn't it kind of hard to not feel put down when the intention is to put you down? Right? So, but what we can do is say, I get it. I can see that this person is trying to hurt me, even not because they want to hurt me, but because they want to feel better about themselves. Isn't that too bad that they feel the need for that?
Yeah. Great. Well done. The next question from another anonymous. Hi, Granny. I complete tasks and I hear one comment about what I've done and I feel like I can't do anything right, which I know is not true. What can I tell myself to stop having reactions when people state the obvious?
Well, that's very interesting because, you know, what I'm hearing from Anonymous is they see the same problem. They're saying if somebody is stating the obvious, they're not saying, oh my God, that person is so unfair. I did a perfect job and they're so unfair. They're saying, no, they're stating the obvious, right? Am I getting that question? So if I'm getting what you're saying is you're fearing the judgment. This is so perfect. After Anonymous 1, Anonymous 2 is a perfect question. Because if you grew up in a universe where you were feeling put down to begin with, then you probably have the same kind of relationship to information that Anonymous 1 has, right? Oh, this is meant to hurt me, and so I'm always afraid of being criticized because it's meant to put me down, right?
Well, supposing they did a task and they didn't pass the white glove test, but one of the things she said, or he said, was that once they make a comment like that, I feel I can't do anything right. That sounds like a childhood conditioning where a person just feels so defective, that it just generalizes like that.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So here, Anonymous, you are also a victim of our society, of the way that we do things in our world. So you're already walking around with a bag of shame hanging on, right? And then you add a drop. I met a woman once who was talking about the problems of people who have chemical sensitivities. And because I have that, multiple chemical sensitivities, and so I'm allergic to everything. Everything makes me sick. Everything is toxic. I can't stand this smell. I can't stand that smell. And she said, well, if you could just clean yourself out of all the toxins, then you might be able to actually go out and walk into a bathroom that has regular soaps in it for 2 minutes and live to tell the story. And that is exactly the point. It's the same thing on an emotional level, that if you have a lot of toxic shame, as they call it, negative feelings about yourself, then what happens is you put one drop in that glass and it spills over. That was the analogy she gave. You say you have the glass is full of toxicity, put a drop in and it spills over. Yeah. But if the glass is empty, you put a drop in, it's like, drop? What drop? I don't see any drop. So, if you have a lot of positive feelings, or at least not a lot of negative ones about yourself, then you can feel way more neutral when somebody comes along and says, oh, I think you forgot to call the customer back and tell them when the delivery date is. You set up everything. The delivery is set, everything is set, but you forgot to call the customer. Oh my God, didn't I do that? Let me get on the phone right now. See, it's like you then take that as help. Now, one more time, supposing the person around you is really trying to put you down because they are defending themselves against feeling bad themselves. Oh, I feel so bad about myself. I need to make you look bad too. Let's make you look bad so I don't feel so sad. Anyway. That's my first rap of the year. Anyway, if the other person is also on top of that trying to put you down, okay, so now you have all your own toxicity that's spilling over when you put a drop in, and then you have the toxic intention of the other person. Now, the sad thing is sometimes there is no toxic intention by the other person, but it's just your cup is running over with shame about yourself, right?
Yeah. So there was a follow-up question of what can I tell myself instead of reacting?
Yeah, she asked herself that question. Could you read that again? And what can I tell myself?
Yeah. What can I tell myself to stop having reactions when people state the obvious?
Well, here's the thing I think it starts with is ask yourself, is it true? Now, you said when they state the obvious, so that implies that it is true. So if the answer is it true, and the answer is yes, I mean, if the question is it true, the answer is yes, well, then you say, I want to get better. I'm smart enough to look past all of this and ask myself if this is really going to help me. I mean, who cares whether they have a judgment about me, unless I'm going to get fired. And if I'm that bad at the job, please fire me. Take me out of my misery, right? Let me go get something else that I'm good at. But if they're not going to fire you, but they're your supervisor or they're a coworker or something, and they tell you something, and you can look at that and say, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I can get better. I know. Yes, yes. You know what I'm going to do next time? I'm going to put a note on my, desk. Did you remember to call the customer, or you put it on my cell phone, have it, give me an alarm that at 4:15, have you called that customer yet? Okay, then I'm not going to make that mistake again. So, I have a relationship with the inner voice that I call God, right? So that's what I was told. I was sitting somewhere and thinking about this very question, right? And the inner voice that at that time I called God, said to me, is it true? What do you care how people tell you? You know how everybody says, oh, but it was so mean. She said it in this way or that way, or she did it this way and that way. It was so God said to me, what difference does that make? Is it true, Beth? Easy for God to say, right? Almost nobody is criticizing God the way they criticize each other. Wouldn't dare. Afraid they'd get knocked over. Anyways, so I think that really taught me something. Don't listen to the messenger. Listen to the message, right? Is the universe actually supporting you by bringing to your attention your weaknesses so that you can get strong? So send them a kiss and say, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I can do better now that I know. And by the way, just one more thing that I'd like to say. If you are at all open to a therapeutic intervention, right, get some counseling, then you might be able to clear up some of that toxic shame that I was talking about that is making the glass half more, almost full. Make it full so that everything falls, when you put another drop in, right?
Yeah, the toxic
glass, so some healing would be very good. But this is, you asked me, what can I say to myself, so I wanted to answer that too.
Very good. Great. This next question is from Richard. Hi, Granny. When I get challenged and life seems hard, the ego wants me to quit and withdraw. What can help me deal with this negative self-talk? Thanks.
Yeah! Well, you don't want to feel like a worm, right? So that you hate, nobody likes to be a quitter, right? Now, there's a difference between pushing yourself to do something you shouldn't do because your ego is saying, I don't want you to look like a quitter. Keep going. Okay, you've got a broken leg and you're going to finish the marathon because you have something to prove as you hobble in on your broken leg and you make it worse and then you have a permanently crippled leg. That is just stupid. So there are times when we should use our judgment, right, to determine that we should stop doing something because it's hurting us. So that's the number one thing, is you have to look at everything and say, well, is it right? Maybe something is too much for me. Maybe I shouldn't be running on a broken leg. So, it's just as much ego, right, to push yourself to prove that you are not a wimp as it is, but let's say we're talking about the other side of that.
Right.
So
The other side is quitting when something is right to be doing, but it feels hard and you just want to bail.
Exactly. So now the question that I would ask myself was, well, why would my ego ever want me to quit if it's the right thing? Right?
That's a good starting question, yeah.
Well, guess what? The ego, now I want to talk about for 2 seconds about what the ego really is, right? The ego is what I call awareness of individual existence. Like you're born, wah, wah, I'm hungry, wah, wah, and your ego is busy saying, you're hungry, you're wet, you're cold, right? So the ego is telling you that you exist as an individual, and somebody has got to be crying, because otherwise you'll be starving, because nobody's going to come and wipe your butt or feed you or anything. So the ego has a very important job, which is to say, I exist, I'm hungry. But unfortunately, in our ego-based world, that's the part of us that gets fed the most. It's like the I. If we took out the word I for an hour, we would not be able to speak. We wouldn't even know what to say. I mean, it's like it's always I think, I feel, I'm cold, I want, I am. So that's fine, I mean, that exists, but it's totally out of balance with the whole, which we're also a part of. And I'll talk about that more on another show, because that would be a great. Would somebody please ask me about the ego, and I'll talk about that on a show. So let's say the part of us that's all ego, that is all about I. When I was talking before about let's push back emission standards on cars, which our current administration is pushing, that is so in the I. That means the fossil fuel industry, the automobile companies, they want us to pollute and all of that for financial reasons, right? But it's very short-term thinking. See, the ego doesn't think in the we, and it doesn't think long-term very often. It tends to be very narrow-based, right? Because it's the awareness of individual existence. So, oh yes, we're going to have more jobs of coal. We're going to have more pollution. Wonderful, it's going to be great for the economy. We're all dying, but who cares? It's great for the economy. And in the moment, you got the job and you say, oh, this is so cool. The gasoline isn't costing as much, and this is, oh, yes, I really need this. But if you're thinking in terms of the whole of society, polluting is going to kill all of us. Global warming, it's the whole schmear, right? So that's the problem. All right, so the out of balance of the ego, which is thinking about the me in the short term, and the consciousness that thinks long term and thinks about the whole, they can be in great conflict. So why would the ego want you to quit, honey? Because it wants to stay in charge. Because what you said was, read that question again, there was something very interesting in the way he put it.
When I get challenged and life seems hard, the ego wants me to quit and withdraw.
Yeah, but go to thank you.
The next one. What can help me deal with this negative self-talk?
Negative self-talk. He didn't ask me, how can I deal with my ego? I'm not being critical. I'm just saying, isn't it interesting, just the word you used, negative self-talk. Your ego is talking negatively to yourself.
Right.
And yourself has the capacity for greater wisdom and understanding, the deeper the self. So the ego is talking to your deeper self, and it's giving you negative messages, telling you that you should quit. So guess what it's doing? It's gaining power over the self. It doesn't even care whether you're quitting or you're not quitting. It just wants you, yourself, to be weaker. So negative self-talk makes you weak. Am I being clear?
Yeah.
Okay.
Clear. So how do you feed the real self instead of the ego?
Yes, very good. Well, first you have to identify that there isn't a self beyond the ego. Part of our problem is that we are so identified with our egos that we don't even get it. For instance, the woman who wears makeup and high heels and puts on uncomfortable clothes and all of that, and makeup that's bad for her, she is not feeding the self, she's feeding the ego. This is about how I look, right? I have a lot more to say about the ego, but I just want to, make this point.
And that statement you made a minute ago was that there's a self beyond the ego.
Exactly. So that is feeding the ego self, right? Is to make you look good to other people so that you can stand out, so you can get your needs met.
Right.
But the real self says, "Ooh, my feet hurt. Oh, my stomach hurts. Oh, this is cutting me under the bra." But I won't even admit it. Most of them think, "Oh, no, I'm fine. I'm just fine. I'm fine. I did not puncture my eyeball with that mascara." So I don't even know if they use mascara anymore. They used mascara when I was growing up. I don't use it, obviously. But anyway, so take a look in a situation and ask yourself, is this feeding your ego, meaning your separation, your sense of separation and your individual existence? Or is this feeding your deeper self, the self that loves, the self that understands, that cares, that's part of the whole, and that's really you? See? Then you'll catch it. You'll say, that ego is trying to make me feel weak. It's trying to put me down so that I will doubt myself. And the only thing that wins is the ego, because the ego doesn't care whether it's bashing you or puffing you up. It's still winning. See, because it's separating from your deeper self. So what you need to do is ignore what it's saying, or just confront it and say, I get it, you're trying to weaken me, the real me, and I'm not going to let you. Are we out of time already?
We are out of time.
Now,
so
are
we'll
you
have
sure?
to put the other questions off till next week. Do you want to give a quick sneak preview?
Well, can you tell me what's coming up?
Well, we have a question about the Catholic Church.
Oh, gosh, and I didn't get to it.
And very concerned about that and how to deal with that. And then also a question about what is spirituality, a follow-on from the previous.
Those sound like really good questions. Well, I am so sorry that I didn't get to either of those questions this day. I know that this issue about the Catholic Church is causing a lot of suffering for a lot of people, and I really want to help support those of you who are in the midst of that. Mm-hmm. People who are demolished and devastated by what they're seeing, and I certainly would like to talk about higher consciousness and anything else that comes up by next week. So I can't believe I did it again. But you ask great questions, and they need substantial answers. So tune in next week and keep those questions coming, because the sooner you put in your question, the sooner that I'll get to it, because I answer the questions in the order that they come. So please do. If you look at the post, it should have a link, and it'll take you to the place. You can either do it anonymously, or you can put in your name, and you put in your question, and I will get to it. So I have 2 questions that we already know that I'm going to be answering next week, and whatever else comes in that I have time for, and you just get in that line, because I will answer your questions. And tonight, we're going to Granny's Kitchen. Yes, Granny's Kitchen is a conversation that we have, that I lead. Sweet Baby James is there, and a whole bunch of other wonderful people, where we talk about the questions the topics that we discuss on this show. So it really is very supportive. And there's information on this post also about how to get to Granny's Kitchen. Yep. And don't forget to come back to Granny's Place next week and tell people about this show. Yeah. We're trying to help people. We really are. And we hope that we are. So spread the word, spread the news, and come back yourself.
Yep, bye for now. See you next time.
Bye-bye.